Hello, Paddle Monsters. I want to thank you for joining me in this interview. Um, Thank you for subscribing to Paddle Monster and to The Catch. I'm really excited today to be interviewing somebody who's new to the paddling scene or to the paddle racing scene at a high level. She's done remarkably well this past season, but she's relatively unknown. She's only 20 years old, hasn't been racing for that long. And I suspect she's a little bit better known in Europe, where she's from. But I bet you she's not that well known in North America. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce everybody to Carolyn Kuntzel from Denmark. Carolyn, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this talk.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. I should start by telling everybody that Caroline is a paddle monster. She joined us in, I think, July. And little did I know when she joined how spectacular her results were going to be this summer. So let me just read through some of the things that you accomplished this year. And I had to write them down because the list is pretty impressive. And it all started late in the year, right? It started in towards the end of August or even the beginning of September. It started with the European Championships, which were held in Denmark. And you were a gold medalist in the sprint event. And then 2 weeks later, you were racing in Poland at the ICF World Championships. You came fourth in the sprints and second in the technical race. I think it was a week after that, maybe 2 weeks after that, you were in London for the APP event, where you came third in the sprint race. And then you got on a plane from London and you went to Korea. And in Korea, you won the sprint event at the APP event there and were third in the distance, which meant you were the overall champion at that APP event. And then you had a bit of a break and you raced at the ISA World Championships in Puerto Rico and you were second in the sprint. So that's 5 major stops, major competitions in a fairly compressed period of time. And you podiumed everywhere. I mean, that's insanely impressive. And what makes it even more impressive, and this is what people don't realize when they see you race, they see your results, and they see these impressive performances. But you spent most of the summer unable to paddle, or at least unable to train properly because of an injury. So I want to ask you a little bit about your injury that kept you from doing the training that you would like to have done. What was the injury? How did it impact your training? And then, we'll talk a little bit about how do you manage to race at such a high level coming off of an injury that has compromised your training. So tell us a little bit about your injury.
Yeah, so it started probably before June, but I realized it in the middle of June after some racing nationally and a little bit internationally on the Euro Tour. But I came home and suddenly I felt this pain in my foot and I got a stress fracture in the foot, which is not great. The doctor said it was probably worse than if I had broken the foot because it's really difficult to heal that type of injury. So I couldn't paddle, I couldn't walk, and I had a lot of pain, so it was difficult for me to deal with. So of course this was not a great timing because it was 2 months before the European Championship and I was prepared to go all in, but I had to step back and figure out something else to heal properly for the coming season. So yeah.
So, I mean, okay, so you couldn't paddle, you couldn't walk, so obviously you couldn't run. Were you able to do something like, for you to maintain your aerobic fitness, were you able to get on a bike and paddle on an exercise bike, or was that hard on your foot as well?
I couldn't go on the bike. The only thing I could do was sit on the rowing machine, but not move the legs. So I had to, pull with my upper body. Right. And then I used a friend's paddle machine, those Weber machines where you can paddle. I used that. But if I wanted to get the volume that I wanted in the training, it was difficult just to do 40 minutes on that one. Yeah, so it was pretty difficult. And
I think the other thing too is when you're using a paddle machine, it's close enough to the paddling motion that your body thinks you're paddling, but it's really different than the paddling motion because there's no sense of connection. There's no sense of, you know, grabbing the water, holding water on your paddle, pulling yourself past the paddle. And so it's not, you know, it might be a decent way to get a workout, but it's not really an ideal thing to be doing for your paddling technique either, right? So
oh yeah, exactly. And the other problem was that I couldn't stand up, so I had to sit on my knees or on my bum, just doing this motion with my upper body. So I really did a lot of upper body training, and I realized that impacted all of my training because I couldn't use my lower body. So suddenly the volume of my training was limited to the upper body, which made me kind of overuse that for a little while. So I had to kind of find a balance, which was pretty difficult.
Right. And I guess too, you're always worried when you change how you do things, that because you're favoring, you know, your injury, and you end up working your body a little bit differently, that you're going to create another injury by how you do a lot of work differently. So that, I mean, wow, what a challenge. Were you able to spend some time in the weight room, like doing some strength work?
I did, yeah, but for my upper body as well. I could do for one of the legs, but at some point because I walked so much on my crutches, the other leg got impacted. So I needed to step back and again limit that amount on the other leg. So it was pretty much upper body strength, and I tried to in the gym kind of simulate sprinting, doing light weight, and just, you know, pull the different machines that I could use to kind of get something similar to a stroke, and similar to sprinting, but it's just not the same.
Right. So this happened in June, or it was in June that you started to feel pain and that you were diagnosed with the stress fracture.
Yeah.
You must have had a good season of training prior to June. Like, I mean, in my experience in paddling, I've seen people be injured and, you know, be impacted, have their training impacted for, you know, a pretty significant period of time. But if they've had a good base of training, that time away from training due to injury impacts them less than somebody who really didn't have a good base. You know, it's those people when they miss training where the impact is really lethal to their performance. So you must have had a good season of training going before the injury occurred.
Yeah, I think I had a good preparation, but prior to that year, I kind of shifted my focus from, you know, overall paddling, doing all distances, to the sprint training. So it was kind of a trial year. I just wanted to see how things went, and I did a lot of changes in my training. So I was not really sure if what I did was the right training. So I did a lot of different training, and luckily that must have helped me in the end. So I guess I had a good base, but it's hard to know when the only thing I have done since I started was doing my own trainings, but it must have worked, I guess.
Right. Okay, so you're injured and you can't train properly, and this is where we meet, right? This is where you signed up for Paddle Monster, and so I've got this girl from Denmark who's racing at the European Championships, so she's obviously a high-level paddler, but she can't train. And I remember, you know, working with you on the program and suggesting, you know, suggesting the training that you should be doing at this point in time, and then realizing that you can't paddle, you can't run, you can't, there's all these things that you can't do. And truthfully, like there was more things that you couldn't do than you could do.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I was like thinking to myself, like, okay, well, how are we going to get this, help this girl get ready? But the timing was, well, it was far from ideal, obviously, because ideal would have been no injury and a solid solid summer of preparation leading into the Euros. But there was a point in late August where things started to look better and you were able to cautiously get back out on the water again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was 14 days before the Euros I were able to get back, but that was difficult as well, because 20 minutes, 30 minutes around that time, I think we talked about that I was able to complete a workout, but it was definitely better than sitting on the rowing machine,
Right.
pulling hard there.
Right.
So it was amazing when I started to see some progress and that my injury had healed in a good way. But it was still really early to say if it was a good idea to go out and do a big race. So I was pretty concerned before the Euros, but we had to give it a try.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, and obviously things worked out really well. The question I have, and I'm sure that people who are listening would probably have as well, is how do you prepare psychologically to race in a high level event like the Euros? European Championships is a high level event with the added pressure that your country is the host. So, anyone who's ever raced in a major event at home knows what it's like, where there's that little bit of extra motivation and incentive and desire to do really well because it's at home. How do you prepare psychologically to race in an event of that magnitude when you know that your training has been so severely compromised, and you know that the girls that you're racing have had much closer to ideal training seasons? What did you do to calm your nerves or build your confidence or sharpen your focus? Like, how did you approach going to the starting line at the Euros when you'd only a couple of weeks before started to cautiously paddle for 20 to 30 minutes at a time?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There was so many things going through my mind the weeks up to the Euros and during the Euros. It was difficult to kind of change my mindset from before my injury. I had these goals that I wanted to accomplish, and I talked to the national coach of the team, and we had set all these plans, and then I needed to immediately change it. So there was a bit of a change in mindset there, but I think I have always been pretty good at changing my mindset and not really expecting too much, because I know in racing and the type of racing I do, sprinting, that so much can happen in a race that it's not over before it's over. So I went to the starting line with this mindset of trying to have the most fun, and I have this thing inside me, I'm really competitive, but I just, instead of thinking about the other competitors, I kind of go into myself and think I want to give everyone the best show ever. And it sounds so strange, but it's only about myself and what I can do. So if I'm not thinking about everybody else, I can just do what I can. So I'll just try to do the most perfect buoy turn and try to catch as much bumps as possible, and literally say to myself, it's so much fun out there. And usually it works. I come from subsurfing, and that's all about having fun, catching waves, doing that thing. So when I went into racing, I tried to apply that mindset, and that was the same I did when I had this injury, because I think even though I had have the time to prepare, I think I needed to use the same mindset, because when you start getting nervous, that can affect you just as much as an injury could. So I guess just applying this fun, everything can happen mindset is my key to the performance I did. And then from heat to heat, going back to this and reminding myself that even though I may have won the last heat, I cannot expect the same to happen in the next one. And I need to kind of go to zero every time. For example, in the final, when I was standing there, I couldn't believe it. And I didn't think I could win. I didn't think I could lose. It was just kind of in the middle ground. I was just ready for everything to happen. So I was opening my options in my head and thinking, wherever this race takes me, that's okay. So I just started the race and raced all I could, and last minute changed my decision about which buoy I would like to take, and just following what was with the conditions, and not being, how do you say it, not already have chosen a path before the race. So being ready to have all options open and have fun on water. So that's it, I guess.
So, well, I mean, that's a wonderful approach to racing. I like to say, from my race experience, that I always did the best when I focused on the process and not the outcome. So, you have goals and there's things that you want to achieve, but when you're on the starting line, it's the wrong time to think about what you want to achieve, because as you say, anything can happen. And if you're too oriented on the result, then I think that impedes your ability to perform in the moment, right? And so it very much is a case of focusing on the process and being in the moment. And then when you add in the element that you deal with in sprint racing in the ocean, where there's bumps, where there's buoy turns, where there's, you can fall, you cannot fall, your competitors can fall or not fall. There's so many things that are going on, that if there's anything in your mind other than just being in the moment and reacting to what's happening, right, then it's probably detrimental to your performance. So, I mean, I think the cool thing in hearing all of this is that you didn't let the fact that your preparation had been compromised, you didn't let the fact that the girls you were racing had better preparation, or at least more ideal preparation, you didn't let that change your attitude or affect your confidence. You still approached the race in the way that you have approached racing before, or that you approached your injury, with this open mind of anything's possible, about being in the moment, about focusing on the process and having fun. And I think the really cool thing is that all of the things that led to you being successful in terms of your approach to racing, that led to being successful in these competitions this year, this is the same. It's not like you need to do anything differently when you're racing next year or the year after. You were able to apply this mindset successfully at the Euros, and then build on that and apply it in Poland at the ICF Worlds, and then take that with you to London and use the same mindset there, and then in Korea. And I don't know, because I talked to you along the way, that each stop had some challenges, whether it was racing on a different board, or whether it was your injuries sort of flaring up a little bit again, and prevent, enough that it made you think about, should I cut back at training today and rest my foot, or feeling a little ill and yet still being able to rally and race well. So, I mean, I think, it's interesting, as a coach, I deal with a lot of paddlers who ask questions about training, or who ask questions about technique, but a lot of people don't ask questions about racing and the mindset of racing, the psychology of racing. And I wasn't a sports psychologist. I was an athlete that worked sometimes with sports psychologists, but everything I ever learned as an athlete that led to success is exactly what the approach that you're taking. And I just think it's really cool that you, at 19 at the time, right? Because you only recently
Yeah.
turned 20. At 19 years old at the time, and relatively inexperienced compared to the girls you were racing, that you were able to arrive at this mindset, which is, like a mindset that athletes, some very talented athletes, struggle to arrive at, right? Like a lot of athletes are limited in their race performance by what's going on between their ears. They're wonderfully talented, but they psych themselves out of the competition, or they feel too much pressure. And as you said earlier, like pressure can affect your performance almost as much as an injury.
Yeah.
And but somehow or other, without a lot of experience and at a very young age, you're able to arrive at this mindset, and despite all of the adversity of having an injury, you're able to perform like so well. It's really remarkable, and I hope that people watch this interview just to hear that, because I think that's instructive to other racers, and I think there's a lot to be learned from how you handle things, that other racers can take and maybe make that more their approach as well. So like really impressive. And as I said, I've dealt with a lot of athletes, and I haven't dealt with you for very long, but like what a what a privilege to work with somebody who, despite so much adversity, was able to come through it so well. Like it really was a lot of fun for me to watch unfold. Like week after week after week. It was just like it was fantastic. And so that's really cool. And I'm going to ask you what comes next. Like, where are you going? Where do you want to go with this? What are your goals moving forward? I'm not going to ask you right away yet, because you did mention you come from a sub-surf background, or a surfing background, right? So I want to ask a little bit about that first. Like, how did you start surfing? Was it traditional, prone surfing where you had hand paddle in and pop up, or was it sub-surfing? And how did you get into that?
Yeah, so my dad is actually was a professional windsurfer.
Okay.
So he was the German champion. So I grew up with him always being out in the storms here in Denmark and around Europe. So I grew up with surfing, but I didn't surf myself until I guess I was 15. So some summers, my dad took out a soft top surfboard, a normal surfboard, just pushing me into the waves, but I didn't really like it. So I didn't stick with that. I did some other sports instead, gymnastics, swimming, and then suddenly when I was 15 years old, I saw the World Championship in stand-up paddle, which was in Denmark at that time, in a city next to me. And I went to see with my family because my dad loved surf and sub. So we went to see it, and I just got so inspired, and I wanted to become like these stand-up paddlers. I wanted to become like Kasper Steinfeld and Connor Baxter and all these paddlers. But I didn't know exactly who they were, but I just saw their performances, and I really didn't see sub as a sport back then. But I realized that, okay, this is a really amazing sport. I want to be a part of this. So I had my birthday 1 month after that, and I got a sub surfboard. I think my dad waited his whole life for me to take that decision. So he was so ready. So I started doing a little bit of prone surfing and sub surfing. Suddenly it was not him taking me out for surf. It was me taking my board to school and then taking the bus from there out to surf every afternoon. So I went sub surfing every day. I think that was about the beginning of 2018. So it's 5 years ago, maybe. And then I started surfing every day. And suddenly Casper approached me and was like, Caroline, do you want to do a competition? And I was so ready. But, I had paddled for like 6 months, so I didn't know if I was good enough. I just wanted to try, because I still had this picture in mind with all the amazing suppers from the World Championship. And I had this dream inside me that I want to become like them. So maybe this was a step on the way.
Right.
But during that time, I went to a subsurf competition and I saw racing as well. And Casper, he said to me that you need to compete in the national championship for racing. So I tried racing one time with him, and then I went to the championship and I got second place. So it was crazy. And then I fell in love with racing. I think that was in maybe September 2018. So not many months after I started. And I just realized that I loved racing a little bit more than subsurfing, but I still did a lot of subsurfing because my dream was to still compete in subsurfing at that time. So I did a little bit of subsurfing and racing, and then in 2019 I slowly got into more and more racing, participating a little bit international competitions and the Euro Tour, and trying to get into the racing scene somehow, because it's difficult. I could travel a little bit with Casper and Christian, but I was in school back then, and it's not easy just to take many weeks off to go racing the world. So that was how I got into racing. It was a little mix of subsurf and racing at the same time. And now I don't do subsurf competitions anymore, but I do it for fun, just to keep the fun. And I also do some shortboard surfing, longboard surfing. I love to compete in longboard surfing as well, but only on a national level, and when I'm not at international racing competitions at the moment.
Right. I'm certain that still enjoying surfing, and doing it frequently for fun. I'm sure that has like a training element to it too. Like, your goals may now be for racing, but the skills that you develop and that you maintain and nurture when you're doing surf, working to surf, those are skills that are incredibly valuable to you as a sprint racer and a technical racer. Right. I mean, it's interesting, you said your father was like a high level windsurfer, a German champion. And I think of you being now an international, world champion or European champion in sup racing. And I think of another world champion that I coach whose parents were high level windsurfers as well, right? And that's Connor.
Yeah.
And we've come at things from a different angle, a totally different location in the world and a totally different angle. And he, I think, pleased his parents by getting involved in surfing and water sports at a much younger age. But it's interesting to see that there's parallels there, both of you as young kids were hanging around the beach, I'm sure, hanging around the ocean, hanging around the waves. So that's really cool. So let me ask you, you mentioned that, during a lot of that time you were a student, and that obviously limited what you could do in terms of competing and traveling and that type of thing. What are you doing now? Like, you're 20 years old and you're a world-class sup racer, and are you taking more courses as a student, like at we call it in North America post-secondary, like past high school, at a university, or do you have a job, or what's I know you have sponsors and you can talk a little bit about them, but what's it like for somebody, an athlete in stand-up paddling at your level in Denmark? What's it like off the water? Like, how do you What's life like? How do you manage training and competing and all the other things that that go on? And how do you, how do you make a living,
Yeah.
doing it?
So I think about a year ago, I took a break from my school. I think it's what you call like extending the education and after high school. So I was doing that for a little bit of time, and I was planning to do that for 3 more years from now. But I realized that to get closer to my dreams, which were to become a world-class athlete, I needed to do something different. And I could see that if I wanted to travel as much as Casper and Connor did, I probably couldn't go to school full time and have a full commitment to that, because when I do something, I really do it 100%. So it was difficult to me to go to school and not get the grades I wanted, or get the grades I wanted and not do well in the sport. So I felt like I had to choose. And luckily in Denmark, we have this educational system where I could like take a break and then catch up the exact same point where I just stopped in, I don't know, 5-10 years. So that's one way to do it, and I can take one class at a time online. So I'm planning to do that at some point. Right now, I haven't really set a date for that, but I really love to take education, and I want to do something with sports or media or something in the future. But right now, I don't think it's the time. But yeah, then the question is how I managed to, make a living out of it. At the moment, I don't live with my parents. I live here in a small house my boyfriend owns. So he's really kind that we have this agreement where I can stay with him and he go traveling with me, and we have these amazing experiences together. Then, of course, there's all these travel expenses, which we can't really, ignore because that's really expensive.
Right.
And you have to get gear and all things like that. So I'm spending maybe half time training and the other half searching sponsors, getting, connections, trying to make things go around. Have a lot of great sponsors here. I've been building that up for 5 years now, because when I started, I actually started already getting sponsors from the point where I knew that I wanted to do international competitions. I started building up kind of a story about what I wanted to achieve and how far I was in that journey. So I've always had this kind of approach to the sport, that I knew that I was not gonna make millions just doing the sport. I needed to have something besides that. But of course, the love for the sport is so big, and my passion is really big, that I'm not really scared that I'm not gonna be able to afford something. I'm gonna find a way somehow to make it happen. So I have some amazing sponsors, for example, a local bank, Hvidbjerg Bank, and also a jewelry company called Klaus Guldsmed. I've had him on board for, I think, 4 years now, so that's almost all 5 years. And then a consulting company called Q-Score Consulting, and then I have an accountant company who helps me with my yearly accounting, things like that, because I don't have enough education to know all the tax systems and all
Right.
that things. So I got a sponsor who can help me with that, which is really great.
Right.
And then I have an energy company who is also doing the energy for kind of this area. So that's really perfect. It's all local sponsors. And then I, of course, have my board sponsor, which is Kona Sports, a Scandinavian brand, which is creating boards together with me, so I can kind of have an impact on my designs
Nice.
in the boards.
Cool.
I sit
Very
with
cool.
the designer doing the board I have now. That is the Kona Ocean surf version. They have a Kona Ocean, which is for the more like not racing people, and then I have the surf version, which is more a technical version, which I have been in the designing process with. So yeah, that's my sponsors now, but I'm always looking for new collaborations, and now I'm growing in the sport. I'm starting to be a little bit more world class.
Right.
So I need more sponsors to support that, of course. But
Right.
that's why I have all winter to do this, to change the approach a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a couple of things strike me with what you've just described. And the first is that, I mean, my sport, when I was a high level athlete, I was part of a national team that had a budget that would pay for all our travel and all our competitions, our training camps. And I was a member of a canoe club that had the boats that we paddled in. And really the only expense initially that I needed was my paddle.
Yeah.
There was a coach at the canoe club who would coach me. And as I got better, I didn't even think I had my own canoe until after I'd won a medal at the Olympics. I just used the club boat.
Wow.
And, in terms of logistics, the national team owned a fleet of boats in Europe that was on a trailer, and they would drive them around from stop to stop on the tour, so that you never had to worry about getting your boat somewhere, and you just wrap up your paddle and take it on the plane with you, and everything was taken care of. It's a lot different in stand-up paddling, and I'm amazed at what athletes like yourself go through to not only get themselves to competitions all around the world, but to get their boards there too. And I worry sometimes that it's such a big expense, because travel is really expensive now. It's such a big expense that I worry, is it going to make the sport is it going to take the sport to a point where athletes can't afford to do it?
Yeah.
Right. I worry about that. And so that's, I mean, I understand how hard it is for you and the other athletes like you to get to the places that you want to race at. And so I also think, for you, you only just turned 20, and yet, for a few years now, you've been promoting yourself and collaborating with potential sponsors and developing relationships with them so that they're supporting you. And, this is really tremendous, because this is something that, a lot of athletes don't do well. And it's, and especially in a sport like stand-up paddling, where it is expensive, it's really important, right? So I think, again, that's a really interesting thing about you, not just have, obviously, I think people who are watching will realize that I'm impressed with a lot of things about you, but that's something too, in addition to how you perform in the water, is the approach you're taking on land that's allowing you to have these opportunities to perform in the water. You're doing that already at a pretty high level, and you're doing it at a young age, right? So you've learned this somehow, and early, and I think that's going to, be really important for you moving forward as you pursue your goals, because you can't, in our sport, I don't think you can do it without this kind of help.
No,
and I guess the third thing I would say, just with regards to an education, is I laugh, or people laugh at me, because I like to say that in Canada, a university degree is usually 4 years.
Yeah.
Right. And I like to say that I crammed a 4-year degree into 8 years. So when I was competing like you were, it was hard to be a full-time student and go to Florida training camp for 2 or 3 months and miss all the classes, and or prepare properly in an Olympic year and take a full course load at school. And so I did years where I only took one course, and I did other years where I, took, I guess I took 3 or 4 courses, but didn't take, there's 2 I didn't take. And I just kind of delayed everything and took my time. In the end, I came out with a degree, but it was, I graduated with people that were a lot younger than me, because it took me so long to get through, but it was totally worth it, obviously. And it's, I applaud you for recognizing that you only have these opportunities as an athlete for a short time.
Yeah.
and but you can go and complete an education later. But it's also a good idea to do what you can now, right? And so you nowadays, they didn't have it when I was competing, but they have online learning and things like that. So it's great. You're able to chip away at your education, and then you'll be able to catch up with it later on. But yeah, it's great. Like it's fun to talk to another athlete who's going through making the similar decisions to what I had to make.
Yeah.
And like I said, I get a lot of laughs out of people for telling them that I crammed a 4-year degree into 8 years. So I think that's tremendous. So look, I guess there's only a couple of other things I'd like really to talk to you about, but I guess one is goals. Like, I mean, you've had such a wonderful season this year, despite things kind of going off the rails a bit in June when you got injured. What's your plan for next year? Like, what goals do you have, and what's the plan with regards to training that's going to help you get to those goals?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely have some goals. I already.
I mean, I know goals are personal, so don't let me make you share something that's personal and you're not yet ready to share, but like in general.
Yeah. So of course I want to improve, and I think I could set some goals of what I want to achieve, and of course in the future at some point I want to become a world champion, but it's not like I have to do it next year or something. Of course, it's always nice if I could get a title like that next year, but I like to set my goals a little differently. So what I did last year when I had to set my goals, I kind of looked at my technique and my performance and how fast could I paddle at certain length, like a sprint course, something like that. And then I recorded myself, looked at it again, and then set goals for what I wanted to improve in. So of course now when I'm more of a specific athlete within sprint, I want to really improve within sprint, and I will take all from this year that I've learned, like being more explosive. I know I'm explosive already, but being more explosive, being better at accelerations, and after turning a buoy, getting even faster in, training those things just specifically within the racing of sprint. That's my goals, and then I have to do some measurement of some kind so I can follow if I'm doing improvements. But that's how I like to set my goals, because of course I don't know what the other competitors are gonna do, or if somebody is gonna come out of nowhere and will be like 10 times better than me or something. So I have to set my goals within what I can control, and of course in terms of how I will manage to reach these goals, I'll work with you from now and during the off season until next year to see what we can do, and then I, of course, have my own personal technical things that I do on water to prepare for next year. But of course, I have some big goals. I want to get some podiums, but I haven't chosen the races that I want to do next year yet. But the ICF, ISA, and the World Cups, there might be. I'm up for it, and then I just have to find sponsors to pay it. So I'm pretty much up for competing at really many races next year.
Wonderful, that's awesome. Let me ask you something. How did you learn how to set your goals, or who was there somebody that helped you in your goal setting process? Like, I mean, your father was a champion windsurfer. Did he sort of teach you, okay, Caroline, this is the approach you should take when setting goals, or is this something that you just figured out on your own?
I guess I grew up with my dad always talking about surfing, and one of the things he always talked about was one of his strengths was that he had a more structural approach to training. So he kind of took all the things that he wanted to work on, wrote them down, and kind of took one at a time. Like, I want to do this looping this way and that way, and I'm gonna work on it this way for so many hours and so many hours. So I grew up with that approach. So I've always kind of heard that. And when I started stand-up paddling, what I did from the beginning in subsurfing was to go to YouTube, watch videos with Cain and all the other good subsurfers, watch him do like 100 cutbacks, and then take that approach, go out for 3 hours and do 300 cutbacks again, and set my goals that way. So I've always been kind of doing it that way. And then I've had some mental coaching here to kind of get me in the right direction of how I apply my mindset to racing. Kasper's girlfriend, Stine, is helping me with mental coaching. She has a PhD in that, a doctor's degree. So she has helped me with goal setting besides that, but I've always had a kind of clear vision for how I want to set my goals, and I always have a notebook beside me to, if I get an idea or a way that I want to achieve something, I write it down and put it somewhere so I can look back and see if I managed to do that. So yeah,
I mean, I think it's fantastic because there are too many athletes, in my opinion, that if you ask them what their goals are, they will say, I want to win this race. I want to be on the podium in this race. I want to, be on the podium in another race. And as you correctly mentioned, really, that's beyond your control, because other athletes have something to say about that as well. And you can't control how fast they're going to be. You can only control what you can do. And I try to encourage athletes to set goals that are kind of performance-based, like based on if right now I can maintain a pace where I'm traveling at 5:45 per kilometer, what do I have to do to be able to travel at 5:35 per kilometer consistently, right? And what do I have to do with technique to be able to do that? What do I have to do with my aerobic fitness to be able to do that? What do I have to do with my strength to be able to do that? How can I improve in these different areas? And maybe that helps me to get to that improved pace that I'm looking for, because I know if I can get to that pace, then I have a better chance of performing well in the races I'm going to go into.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's exactly the type of goal setting that you're describing. And that is what I learned a long time ago as a canoe athlete, about how to set goals. And and again, I keep saying this, and I apologize for saying this, but I think it's hugely impressive that you just turned 20 and you're doing so many things right. And this is just like another one of them, right? Like that the way you're setting your goals is really it's really intelligent, and it drives, I think, the possibility of you being successful, because you're looking at how do I get better in specific things that are going to make me better. But I also think the other thing is that it never sets you up to be a great success because you improved, but feel like a failure because you didn't get to a podium, because other girls who were maybe better got to the podium instead of you. And I always think it's tragic when an athlete performs wonderfully well, improves tremendously in a given season, and they're disappointed because they didn't win, or they didn't come second, or they didn't come third. Maybe they came fourth. But if they improve so much, how can fourth place be a failure?
Yeah.
And so I just think that's, again, to me, it's very impressive that you're able to take this approach and And I think you'll have great success with it, because that's, I think, the right approach to take. So, look, I want to thank you for spending this time with our Paddle Monster members, because I think they're going to find this interview fascinating. Um, I have one more question, and it's a question I like to ask everybody, and that's simply, what do you like best about paddling?
So the thing I like the best about paddling is that I can do it everywhere where there's water, and have fun with it with anyone. So if I'm by myself, I can have great fun out at the lake, out in the waves. If I'm with friends, with strangers, I can have fun. So it's just that being able to do it everywhere, and always being able to find something that I'm grateful for when I'm out paddling. It can be beautiful, it can be rainy, but just that I can get out on water, it's kind of a privilege, because it's not always that you can do that, and just being by the water, it's amazing.
That is a great answer. That's a great answer. Caroline, I just want to thank you for spending this. I don't know what it was, whether it was 30 minutes or an hour. Quite frankly, it was so interesting to me. I lost track of time, right? So, but I want to thank you. I think, what you've done this season is wonderful. This interview's sort of given me a little bit more insight into how you were able to accomplish the things that you accomplished this year. And it makes me really enthusiastic about continuing to work with you into the future, and watch where your career takes you. So thank you again for spending this time with our members, and best of luck moving
Thank you so
forward
much.
through the off season and into next summer.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It was really a lot of fun to do this.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much.